By the time the coffee made that thin, wheezing sound at the end, the house was already pretending to be calm. The radiator ticked like a nervous fingernail against the wall, and a church bulletin lay open on the table under a ring of yesterday's mug. I rinsed the pot with a squeeze of lemon dish soap, lifted it to the window for the light, and saw a constellation of scratches I couldn't remember earning. "Mom? You up?" Miles called. "Too bright for a Saturday." "I'm vertical," I said, toweling the pot, watching a salt-gray sedan nose against the curb. Raquel came around the passenger side in suede boots you don't wear where snow melts into slush. She held her elbows like the air might wrinkle her. When the door opened, the February air brought the smell of car heater and something expensive vanilla with pepper. Miles kissed my cheek and missed. Raquel's smile was the kind you put on for a church directory photo once and hope it lasts all year. "You eat?" I asked. "We grabbed something on the way," she said, looking past me at the refrigerator like it owed her money. "We thought we'd swing by and help with things." "What things?" The radiator answered for them. "Just some house stuff," Miles said, eyes flicking to the hallway like there was a test posted there. "Light bulbs." "That loose step? It's been loose for 20 years, I said. "It likes attention." He laughed like a person who heard the joke from another room. "We could fix it today." Quick. Raquel set a grocery bag on the counter without asking. Kale, Greek yogurt, a narrow loaf that called itself bread but looked like a promise it couldn't keep. On top, a glossy magazine about aging well, with a cover line that was either kind or cruel, depending how you read it. "I like Wonder Bread," I said. "White flour spikes glucose," she said, not unkindly, but not to me. Miles reached for the step stool without asking. He was taller than his father had been. I noticed it at odd times, like when he ducked an imaginary doorway. The bulb above the sink had been dead a week. The dark didn't bother me. I know my kitchen by the shape of it, the notch by the stove where the tile never sat flat, the drawer that won't close unless you touch its left hip first. "Also, the handrail," he said, "feels loose." "It's winter," I said. "Everything loosens in winter." He worked in silence for a while, the kind that fills with the wrong things if you let it. The radiator sighed. Outside, someone's dog hit the end of its leash and apologized in yelps. Raquel opened my fridge and made a face that started with her nose. "You should let us stock this," she said. "We can set up delivery so you don't have to carry things." "I like to choose my apples," I said. "Some are soft and pretending not to be." "We can choose them," she said, and shut the door like it needed time to think. Miles came down from the stool. "We've been talking," he said to the counter. "There are resources. Maybe time to adjust some stuff for safety." "Adjust," I said, tasting the word. "Like a hem." "Like the stairs," Raquel said from the hallway. "That rug at the top curls. You could catch your foot if, say, your hands were full." 8. I dried my hands on the dish towel until it turned from blue to a darker blue. "I carry one thing at a time." Raquel looked at the doorway like I was standing in the wrong one. "We found a condo complex by the lake with an elevator and on-site medical. They have community nights, painting, trivia." "I have community here," I said. The radiator ticked again, like it agreed. Miles cleared his throat. "It's not about. We just want." "Same floor living," Raquel said. "Fewer variables." Variables. I hadn't heard that word out loud since the hospital, when charts were a language and I could read people by their blood work. Back then, I fed surgeons at 3 a.m. Warmed hands that had been in rooms colder than the moon. I learned which residents washed their hands twice and which ones wrote PRN when they meant "we'll see." Miles held a folded piece of paper. Not a brochure thicker, with a faint watermark. He didn't put it down. He just let it exist near me. A list. Columns. I didn't look hard enough to read the words, but I read the posture. the way he kept his thumb over the top third like a man on a crowded bus guarding his wallet. "We can talk later," he said too quickly, the way people in movies talk when a bomb is under the table and no one wants to frighten the diners. "Tell me now," I said, wiping a clean counter again, the lemon smell spreading until it tasted like a memory. "Tell me what you practiced in the car," Raquel breathed, a small, polished sound. "Miles worries." "After your little spell at church." "A faint," I said. "Christmas Eve service goes long. Frankincense is bossy." "Exactly," she said, like we had agreed. "And you're alone here. Stairs, ice. That side door that sticks. We sanded it last spring," I said. "It chooses who it opens for." She let the corner of her mouth lift. "Doors shouldn't choose." Miles reached for my hand and didn't take it, his fingers hovering like a prayer. "We made a spreadsheet," he said, finally saying it. "Just to think through budgets, timing, insurances, so you're covered. In case." "In case," I said, and the radiator's ticking got faster, like a line on an EKG finding a hill to climb. "What's the timing of in case?" He looked at the paper as if it might answer better than he could. "It's not, we're just modeling." "Modeling," I said, like a dress on a hanger that may or may not fit a real person. Raquel stepped closer, boots silent on the kitchen mat. "It's love, Evelyn," she said, and there was the real thing inside the sentence if you tilted it. Not love, but a position that looked like it from far away. "We want to prevent events." "Events," I repeated, almost kindly, words like coats you can turn inside out. We walked the house then, the three of us like a tour group seeing a ruin. Miles tested the railing. Raquel picked up framed pictures and put them down in slightly better positions that weren't ours. At the top of the stairs, she pressed her toe to the rug. It folded the way it always had, a tired trick. "I'll nail it today," Miles said. "I like it this way," I said. "You like tripping?" Raquel asked, first genuine smile of the morning. "Gives a person something to do," I said. In the bedroom, sunlight did its best with what February allowed. My dresser held what it has always held, a ceramic dish with paper clips and 2 screws that don't belong to anything anymore, a photo strip from the street. Joe County Fair where Miles was 6 and had a popsicle grin, a watch that ticks only when it feels like it, the ring dish that's empty now. Raquel opened the top drawer. Lavender sachet met her face. She closed it quickly. Miles checked the window locks, the kind inherited from a decade when all threats were polite. "We can swap these out," he murmured. "Not to me." "Your uncle called?" I said to his back, and felt him tense like a deer hears a twig. "Said you 3 might come by later. Something about Sunday dinner." Miles waited a beat too long. "Yeah," he said. "We were going to tell you. He wants to pitch in." "Alvin doesn't pitch," I said. "He keeps the bat." Raquel glanced at the thick paper in Miles's hand, and there it was, quick as a streetlight changing. A look that wasn't meant for me. Calculation, but softer. Maybe compassion for a future version of herself without suede boots. In the hallway, the radiator coughed. I put a hand on the wall to steady it. "Mom," Miles said, softer. "We're trying to be proactive, like you always taught me. Fix it before it breaks." "You fix what's yours," I said, looking at the picture of his father we keep there, because walking past it still keeps the house upright. "You ask before you fix what isn't," he winced. "We're asking." "Then leave the rug," I said. "For now." Back downstairs, the coffee had cooled into that thin bitterness doctors always pretend is fine. I poured 3 mugs and handed them out like communion. Raquel wrapped both hands around hers without drinking. Miles put his on the table near the paper, the edges of which had begun to curl like something alive. "I can handle stairs," I said. "Of course," Raquel said quickly, too quickly to be true. The condo has activities." "I have activities," I said. "I embroider sermons into dish towels so the pastor behaves." Miles laughed for real, and then stopped for real too. He slid the paper toward me an inch. Then, 2. A courtesy. I didn't reach for it. We looked at it the way people look at a lake in March. You think you know when it will hold you, and you don't. Okay, I said, and the word surprised me because it had 2 meanings in it, and I meant both. Let's make a list. What breaks if I fall? What breaks if I don't? Raquel blinked. Miles exhaled. The radiator relaxed its ticking into something like a breath. Also, I said, rinsing the mugs, the lemon coming back bright and cleansing. I'm switching banks. The lady at Northside thinks my first name is Honorable. That makes me nervous. Why? Miles asked, too quickly. There it was again, the sideways glance toward the paper. Because people who call you On think they already know the end of your story, I said. I'm not ready for an ending. Raquel put her mug in the sink like it might explode. We'll come back tomorrow with the drill, she said. And we'll bring the list. Miles kissed my cheek and didn't miss this time. At the door, he hesitated. You'll call if the rug gets mouthy? I said. I'll put it in time out. They left a ribbon of cold air that tugged at the hem of my sweater. I watched the sedan pull away and sit at the stop sign longer than it needed to. 2 silhouettes turning toward each other, mouths moving. The street was quiet again, the kind of quiet where you hear the past more than the present. The radiator ticked once, decisively, like it had decided something. I dried the counter that didn't need drying and opened the drawer with the rubber bands that keep themselves in a marriage no one approves of. I took out the little spiral notebook I use for grocery lists and wrote, Bank, Rail, Rug, Alvin. Then, on a clean line I didn't intend to make, I wrote, In case, when. The question mark sat there, small and neat as a seed, and I could feel it split inside me, sending down a route I would have to learn the name of. The night settled heavy, the way Midwestern winters do, where the wind forgets where to go and presses its whole weight against the siding. I'd left the lamp on in the front room, a small circle of gold that made the shadows sharper. My sweater still held the faint perfume of Raquel's boots, or maybe it was just in my head, clinging like static. I should have gone to bed, but the quiet kept answering questions I hadn't asked. I poured myself the last inch of the coffee, now mud-thick and cold, and sat at the kitchen table where the magazine Raquel brought had slipped halfway onto the floor. Aging well, protecting your assets. The word assets looked like it had teeth. I reached for my own notebook instead. Grocery lists, sermon notes, utility numbers scrawled quick. When I flipped a page, something else slid free. A folded sheet, no, thicker, smooth. The kind of paper accountants like, not mine. I opened it slow, the way you unfold a letter you're afraid might burn you. Columns, rows. Names at the top, Miles and Raquel. And further down, another, Alvin. I ran my thumb over the ink, tidy, clean, with little color codes, debts in red, assets in black. A line that read, Evelyn House, 215th Est. Another, insurance, 100K confirmed. And then, like a throat tightening, timeline, 3-6, Mo, optimal. The radiator hissed behind me, a long exhale that almost covered the way my own breath caught. I read it again, slow. Savings accounts listed with frightening accuracy down to the last 100. Even the emergency CD at Northside, the one I never mentioned. I pushed the paper away like it was hot. My hands smelled faintly of lemon soap, sharp against the ink. I thought about how Miles had held it earlier, thumb covering the top third. That was an accident. That was muscle memory, like a man who's practiced hiding a thing. The house creaked as if someone had stepped where they shouldn't. I got up, checked the locks front, side, back, fingers cold on the metal. All set, just me and the furnace's tired sighs. Back at the table, the paper stared. Numbers don't lie, but they don't love, either. They only tally. And in that tally, My life was nothing more than a subtraction problem waiting to clear. I whispered out loud, just to hear it in air. Timeline, 3 to 6 months. The words didn't sound like mine. They sounded like a doctor giving a prognosis no one had asked for. I folded it back, neat as it had been, but the crease felt different now. Stiffer, like a scar. I slid it into my notebook, between milk, eggs, flour, and a recipe for sweet bread my mother wrote down 30 years ago. If they were going to make me into an asset, I'd make myself into evidence. The phone rang then, shrill and jagged in the quiet. I jumped, heart thudding. Caller ID, Alvin. My brother never called this late unless he wanted something. I let it go once, twice. On the third ring, I picked up, pressing it hard to my ear as if closeness might change the voice. Evie, he said, using the name only he did. You still up? I am now. My voice sounded flat, but I let it. He coughed. I could hear television chatter in the background, Patricia's voice faint, sharp as a knife scraping a plate. Listen, Sunday dinner we're thinking your place. Haven't done that in a while. Last time was 5 years ago, I said. Then we're overdue. A pause. I'll bring dessert. You never bring dessert. He laughed, short. Patricia's been nagging me, wants to make it up to you. I said nothing. On the table, the paper's corner poked out from my notebook like a tongue daring me to tell him. You still there? Still here, I said. Well, good. We'll see you then. Don't fuss. We'll handle everything. The line clicked, dead. I sat with the phone still warm against my cheek. His words replayed, but what lingered wasn't what he said it was, what he didn't. Not how are you, not do you need anything, just don't fuss. We'll handle everything. I pushed back from the table. My knees cracked like old wood. Upstairs, the bedroom mirror waited, catching me in its square the way it always had. I stood in front of it, looking at a woman with gray hair tucked too neatly, hands rough from cafeteria trays, a face still soft enough to believe in family. 3 to 6 months, I whispered to her. She didn't flinch. I pulled open the top drawer. Inside lay the small things I hadn't parted with. Frank's watch, stopped at 4:12. A dried corsage from Miles's prom. A photo strip where my lipstick bled onto his cheek when he was a boy. I laid the folded paper there, between the watch and the corsage, as if the past could keep the future honest. Downstairs, the furnace groaned and kicked on again. The house held, but I knew then it wasn't just winter making it feel colder. It was something else, slipping under doors, wearing familiar shoes. Sleep didn't come. I lay in the dark listening to the pipes. Each knock felt like a count, a tally of time I hadn't agreed to, somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m. I opened my eyes wide in the dark and promised myself out loud, if they're planning, so am I. The words stayed in the air, invisible but sharp, the kind you could trip on if you weren't careful. The restaurant smelled of butter and old carpet, the kind of place where the lights are dim enough to hide prices. Miles had chosen it. Or maybe Raquel. She walked in ahead of him, coat draped over her arm like the air itself might stain it. Table for 3, Miles told the host, voice too cheerful, almost rehearsed. I followed them past rows of couples leaning over wine glasses. The air hummed with soft music, silver clinks, the occasional laugh too loud. They sat me near the wall, where I could see the exit but not much else. A candle flickered between us, dripping wax down a glass holder. You like it here, right? Miles asked. You said once their lasagna reminded you of the church potluck. I hadn't said that. Not exactly. I remembered telling him the breadsticks weren't half bad, but I nodded. Raquel smiled, glossy and exact. We wanted to treat you. No worries about the bill tonight. The menu was heavy in my hands, like a catalog of lives I couldn't afford. Raquel nudged hers closer to me. Try the seafood risotto. It's their best. Expensive, but well, tonight's special. Lasagna's fine, I said. Miles laughed too quickly. Mom always sticks with what works. A server poured us water. I caught Raquel watching me as I added lemon. Her eyes weren't on me, they were on my hands. She saw the tremor I try to hide when the weather turns. She filed it away without a word. When the appetizers came, breadsticks brushed with too much garlic, Raquel leaned forward. How have you been feeling lately? I tore bread, dipped it in sauce, chewed until I had time to make my voice even. Like anyone feels in February, tired of snow, ready for spring. Any dizziness? Trouble with stairs? She pressed, casual as weather talk. Miles joined in. Yeah, Mom, you mentioned your knee last month. Slipped on the back step, right? That was ice, I said. Ice makes clowns of us all. Raquel smiled, tilting her head as if she'd caught me out. Still, falls at your age can be serious. Maybe time to think about safer living spaces. I sipped water, the lemon bitter against my tongue. Safer than home? They exchanged one of those looks couples learn, where words aren't needed. Miles fiddled with the napkin, folding it, unfolding. The entrees arrived. My lasagna steamed, smelling of oregano and cheese that didn't stretch like it used to in church kitchens. Raquel's risotto gleamed under the light. She cut into it delicately, as if the rice might protest. Between bites, she asked, "Do you have a will, Evelyn? I mean, just curious. It's smart to have everything in order. Prevents complications." Her fork moved slow, careful. Her tone stayed bright, but her eyes never blinked. I set mine down. "There's a document," I said. "Basic. Made a while ago." Miles leaned in, elbows on the table like a boy again. Who's listed?" "The cat," I said, deadpan. He blinked. Raquel's smile froze before she remembered to laugh. "Seriously, Mom." His voice softened. "It'd give us peace of mind. I could even help review it. You know, with my legal background. Peace of mind." Words dressed in Sunday clothes. My chest tightened, but I let a small smile come. Maybe someday. Raquel changed tack. "Insurance companies can be a nightmare. Do you have someone to handle that? In case of events?" "Events." Again, that word, slippery as oil. "I pay my premiums," I said. Never missed one. Miles reached for his wine, hand shaking just enough to clink glass against glass. "Good. That's good." The server returned with dessert menus, but Raquel waved them off. "We'll have coffee, strong, for all three." As the cups landed, dark and bitter, she leaned closer. Her perfume, pepper and vanilla filled my nose. "We worry about you living alone. What if something happened and no one was around?" I stirred the coffee slowly, the spoon ringing soft against the cup. "Then I suppose it would be quiet." She blinked, thrown for half a beat, then recovered. "That's exactly what scares us." The check came, slid under a black folder. Miles snatched it before I could see. His hand hovered just a little too long with the pen, as if numbers on paper had begun to mean more to him than words in a room. We stepped outside into the bite of night air. The snow under the streetlight looked sharp, like ground glass. Raquel tugged her gloves on, adjusting each finger carefully. "We'll drive you home," Miles said. The ride was filled with filler words, weather, traffic, a neighbor's new truck, but as we pulled into my driveway, the real script came back. "Let us walk you in," Raquel insisted. "These stairs are dark, dangerous." Inside, their eyes scanned more than their feet. Raquel brushed her hand along the banister. "Loose," she murmured. Miles tested the rug at the top with his boot. "Should be nailed." They weren't visiting. They were inventorying. I set my purse on the hall table. "I'm fine," I said. "Mom," Miles said, the word heavy. "Accidents don't wait for readiness." "Accidents." I met his eyes, steady. "Neither do mothers." He flinched. Raquel opened her mouth, closed it again. They left with polite kisses and cold air trailing behind. The house went still. I stood in the hallway, touching the banister they had just judged, feeling its old steady strength under my hand. It had held me through decades of storms, and tonight it held me again. But in the silence that followed, I could hear their words still circling, the way vultures circle without landing. Will. Insurance. Safer living. Events. Each one found a place inside me, sharp enough to cut. I turned off the light and whispered to the dark, "They're building a case. And I'm the evidence." They came on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced but carrying the tone of invitation. Miles held a toolbox that didn't belong to him, still had a sticker from Home Depot, clean edges, no dents. Raquel followed with a clipboard. Not a notepad, not a grocery list, a clipboard. "Thought we'd knock out a few projects," Miles said. The words too casual, as if the sentence had been sanded smooth. I stepped aside. The cold followed them in, dragging salt and the metallic smell of wet pavement. My slippers picked up the damp as I shut the door. In the kitchen, Raquel spread papers across the counter. Lists, notes, diagrams. "We made a plan," she said brightly. "Safety upgrades." She said upgrades the way salesmen do when the old model still works fine. Miles started at the front door, tightening hinges that weren't loose. He pressed his weight against the frame, making it groan. "See? This could stick in an emergency." "It's stuck for 30 years, I said. "We get along fine." Raquel clicked her pen, making neat little check marks. "Emergency access compromised." The radiator gave a sharp pop, like it wanted to speak up for me. They moved room to room. In the bathroom, Raquel lifted the bath mat. "No rubber backing. That's a fall risk." She sniffed, faint perfume battling the mildew of old grout. Miles bent to test the tub handles. "These aren't ADA compliant." "I'm not the ADA," I said. My voice sounded thin, but I let it stand. In the hallway, Raquel ran her fingers along the pictures on the wall, pausing at the one of Frank in his uniform, hat tilted, grin half shy. She didn't smile back. She set it down on the console as if weighing its worth. "Glass frames near stairs," she noted. "Shatter hazard." I pressed my palm against the wall where Frank's picture had been, feeling the faint warmth left from her touch. Miles crouched at the base of the stairs, wobbling the banister. "Loose," he said, as if the word itself condemned me. "It's held me longer than you have," I answered, softer than I felt. He straightened, toolbox clattering as he reached for a drill. "Better fix it now before." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Raquel tested the rug with her boot again, pressing harder this time, then stepping back to see the curl. "You'll trip. It's inevitable." I imagined her practicing that word in the mirror. Inevitable. In the bedroom, Miles opened drawers, looking for nails, he claimed. He found letters instead. Bills, recipes, Frank's old watch. He handled them like props, like evidence. "You should digitize these," he said, voice clipped. Raquel opened the closet. She pushed coats aside, finger trailing the bar. Heavy fabrics. "If you fell here, no one would find you until..." Her voice trailed off, but she smiled, a polite correction. "Until later." I stood still, the air heavy with cedar and dust. My heart thudded, but I kept my face calm. "Someone always finds me," I said. They laughed, brittle, like a sound effect added in after. Back downstairs, Raquel scribbled on her clipboard. "Lighting, carpeting, railings, mats. We can knock this out in phases. Miles can handle most. The rest will contract." "Contract," I repeated, the word tasting like plaster. Miles wiped his hands, though he hadn't gotten them dirty. "We'll cover costs. Don't worry. Cover costs." The phrase lay between us like bait. I walked to the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. Outside, Alvin's truck was parked across the street, engine idling. He wasn't coming in, just sitting, watching, smoke curling from the driver's side window. "Your uncle's here," I said without turning. Miles hesitated. "He said he might swing by." Raquel didn't look up. "He's part of the support plan." The radiator hissed, long and disapproving. I turned back to them. "Support," I said. "That what you call it?" Raquel smiled, clipboard tucked under her arm. "We only want what's best." Her tone was honey, but the pen in her hand was sharp enough to cut. They packed up slowly, gathering tools they hadn't used, leaving behind the faint smell of sawdust, though nothing had been sawn. At the door, Miles kissed my cheek, eyes darting to the banister as if it might collapse before his next visit. "We'll be back Tuesday," he said, "with Uncle Alvin." "Bigger projects," Raquel added, "and maybe we'll bring the documents we mentioned. So everything's clear." Clear. Another word that meant its opposite. The door shut behind them, the cold trailing like a ghost. Their car pulled away, Alvin's truck following slow, taillights fading at the end of the block. I stood in the hallway, touching the banister, solid oak, warm under my palm. It didn't feel loose, it felt steady. The rug curled at the corner, same as always, a small rebellion that had never hurt me. But now every object in the house looked different. The mat wasn't just a mat. The stair wasn't just a stair. They had turned my home into a map of hazards, a blueprint of endings. In the kitchen, I opened my notebook and added a word under yesterday's question, in case when. Now I wrote, when. Here. The radiator gave one last pop and fell silent, as if it too understood. Morning crept in through the lace curtains like it had doubts about being welcome. The air was sharp with the smell of last night's lemon polish, mixed with the faint sweetness of cedar from the closet I'd opened before bed. I couldn't sit still, my body carried too many echoes. So I pulled down the old box of photographs, the one that had lived under the quilt for as long as I've been widowed. The cardboard edges bent under my hands like they knew secrets I'd tried to forget. Inside, a Polaroid of Frank, his hospital badge crooked, smiling as though exhaustion could be disguised as charm. Next to it, a strip of carnival photos where Miles, at 6, grinned with a popsicle mouth. His teeth were blue, his eyes were wild joy, and I remembered selling my bracelet to pay for the fare tickets. That was the year I took double shifts, just so he could have sneakers that didn't squeak like apology. Beneath that, a reunion photo from decades back. Alvin stood to the side, as though the family was a picture he hadn't been invited into. His arms folded, his jaw set like stone. I remembered the Jell-O incident, the way he mocked me when it wouldn't set, how the cousins laughed along. He never forgot that I was the one who finished school while he dropped out. To him, my paycheck, my house, my very survival became insults that demanded repayment. I laid the pictures out on the table, side by side, a life measured in sacrifices that never made the ledger Raquel loved so much. I could smell the faint dust on the paper, the sharp chemical of old film. Each image was both proof and accusation. I remembered the night Miles brought Raquel home the first time. She stepped in with perfume that smelled like ambition and disdain in equal measure. She carried flowers too perfect to be real, their stems wrapped in foil like a bouquet for a stage performance. At dinner, she praised the roast politely, but her eyes lingered on the worn edge of my table, the squeak of the chair, the faded curtains. She was already calculating what wasn't good enough. Later, as I washed dishes, Frank whispered, "She's not eating food, she's eating inventory." I laughed then, but it lodged somewhere in me. Raquel wasn't cruel that night. Cruelty takes practice. But she had the seed of it, the kind that grows in someone raised to believe comfort is a birthright. The kettle whistled, snapping me back. I poured hot water over a bag of black tea, the steam clouding my glasses, the scent tannic and grounding. I took it to the living room, sat by the radiator's hiss, and let the heat on my palms steady me. The house was filled with ghosts, but not the kind that slam doors or rattle chains. These were quieter. Frank's watch in the drawer, the faint indentation of Miles's childhood handprint in the concrete step outside, the smell of lavender sachets I tucked into drawers after every paycheck. Sacrifices don't haunt, they linger, polite, reminding you what they cost. And the villains in my life? They weren't strangers breaking in. They were made in this house, at my table, by my hands. Alvin's envy, Patricia's pettiness, Raquel's condescension, even Miles's entitled blindness, each had its roots in years where I gave until I believed it would be enough. And somehow, it never was. I thought of the pawn shop where I left my wedding ring. The clerk weighed it like produce, tapped numbers into a calculator, handed me bills with fingers that didn't care. "You'll buy it back," he said without conviction. I told myself I would. Instead, I bought Miles his first computer and watched his eyes light up in a way he never looked at me again. That was love, I thought, then trading your permanence for their future. But maybe it was also the first step in teaching him that I was collateral. By noon, the tea had cooled to bitterness. I walked to Northside Bank, coat buttoned to my chin, air biting my cheeks. The clerk called me Han, without reading the letters on my account. She slid statements across the counter, every cent accounted for, every cent available for someone else to covet. On the way home, I cut through the church lot. The notice board still clung to announcements. Lent soup night, bingo shift, coat drive. The wood smelled faintly of mildew and candle smoke. I sat in the back pew, the air thick with polish and prayers, and said my usual line, "You see how it island." And in the quiet, I swear I heard Frank's voice as it used to be when he drifted awake from the TV. "You good?" "I will be," I answered aloud, though the pew groaned under me like it didn't believe. That night, Marina stopped by with soup, her scarf bright as fruit against the winter dark. She kissed my cheek, looked at my face too long, and said, "Tell me what they've done." I slid the ledger copy toward her, and she read it in silence, her lips tightening at the word optimal. When she was finished, she said, "Then we make a plan. Quiet, careful, boring for them. Brilliant for us." Her thumb bore a small paper cut from the page. She sucked the blood away and smiled at me with a steadiness that made the house breathe easier. After she left, I wrote in my notebook beneath yesterday's line, "When, here." This time I added, "Plan, mine." The radiator hissed once, like agreement, then fell silent. The papers lay on my table all night, their edges curled from the damp, whispering like restless mouths whenever the furnace kicked on. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my chair with a blanket across my lap and my notebook open, making lists. Not shopping lists, not chores. Lists of defenses. By morning, the first light slid across the table and revealed what I had done. Replace locks, hide copies, witness signatures, call attorney, quietly. Record. Always record. The pen's ink had bled through the page, a shadow of every word pressing into the sheet below. At 9, Marina arrived with her usual scarf and a thermos steaming of cinnamon coffee. She set it down, unscrewed the lid, poured into 2 cups like we'd rehearsed it for years. "Armor Day," she said, as if naming a holiday. I laughed once, brittle. "I'm no knight." "You don't need a sword," she replied. "You've got a pen, and me." We started with the locks. Marina knew a handyman who owed her a favor, a quiet man named Hector who arrived in a van with no signage and eyes that didn't pry. He worked fast, hands sure, replacing the deadbolts with newer, heavier ones. When he tightened the last screw, the door clicked with a finality that felt like a heartbeat settling. "Keep the old keys somewhere safe," Marina whispered. "If they try to use them, we'll know." Next came the copies. I spread the documents across the kitchen counter, smoothing them with my palm. The language coiled with legal precision, in the event of incapacity, granting full authority, transfer without contest, words that made absence sound tidy. I fed them into the copier at the library, the machine humming like an accomplice. Each page slid out warm, smelling faintly of toner. I tucked one set into my coat pocket, another into Marina's bag, and mailed a third to a P.O. box I had opened that morning under a name borrowed from my grandmother. Back home, Marina placed a small black device on the shelf near the stairs. Motion activated, she explained. Picks up voices, even whispers. Another went under the living room lamp, disguised by dust. One more above the kitchen door. If they're going to play inspectors, let's give them something to inspect. I tested the recorder, tapping the banister. Later I played it back, the hollow knock. My breath, Marina's faint humming as she checked her list, clear as glass. The air in the house changed then. For weeks, it had felt like a stage, every rug and rail waiting for a slip. Now it felt like a witness, every corner watching back. At noon, Marina opened her thermos again. "Eat something," she said, sliding half a sandwich toward me. I shook my head. My stomach was taut with more than hunger. "You need strength to fight," she insisted. "Armor's no good if the person inside it collapses." I bit, chewed, swallowed. The bread was rough, the cheese sharp, grounding me in the ordinary. We practiced too. Marina read from the papers in Raquel's bright cadence, and I answered in steady refusals. "I need time. I'll consult my lawyer. This isn't urgent." We rehearsed like actors learning lines, only our stage was survival. When evening came, the house quieted. Snow ticked against the windows, soft but relentless. I walked through each room, hand on wood, tile, fabric. Every creak, every corner had been part of my life for 30 years. They wanted to make it my coffin. I was making it my fortress. Upstairs, I opened the drawer with Frank's watch, slid my notes beside it, and whispered, "Stay with me." The watch didn't tick anymore, but I felt time anyway, pressing, circling. Later, I sat with Marina by the low lamp. "Do you ever feel," I asked, "like they've been planning this longer than I realized?" She looked at me with eyes steady as anchors. "Greed doesn't plan. It waits. Then it pounces." "Then I'll be ready," I said. We sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the recorder and the distant whine of the wind down the alley. Before bed, I wrote one last line in my notebook, neat as I could. They forged the trap. I forged the armor, and when I closed the book, my hand no longer trembled. They arrived exactly at 5, like a meeting scheduled on a calendar I had never seen. The knock was polite, 3 taps with the back of a knuckle, but it landed in my ribs like a hammer. Marina had come early, claiming the soup pot needed returning, though it sat empty and washed on my counter. She leaned in the doorway now, arms folded, her scarf coiled around her neck like armor. When I opened the door, Raquel's smile was already waiting, stretched neat as ribbon on a gift you didn't ask for. Alvin followed with a briefcase too shiny for unemployment, and Patricia trailed behind, carrying a tin of cookies with the price tag still curling from the bottom. Miles came last, shoulders squared, toolbox in hand again, this time scuffed just enough to look used. "Evening, Mom," he said, and kissed my cheek with lips that didn't pause long enough to feel. The cold air slipped in behind them, smelling of salt and exhaust. I shut the door and the house exhaled, settling around us. "We thought we'd bring a little sweetness," Patricia said, setting the tin down like an offering. "You must get lonely with just plain toast." "I make more than toast," I answered, but my voice came out thinner than I wanted. Raquel took the clipboard from her purse and laid it on the table. "We've been thinking about long-term safety," she began. "Transitions, plans. It's important to make sure nothing is left unclear." The word hung there, dangling. Clear, as if I were fog itself. Miles cleared his throat. "We were hoping to go over some paperwork tonight." "Simple updates, nothing complicated. You'd still be in charge, of course. Just streamlined." His tone was buttered, but his eyes flicked to Alvin, who had already opened the briefcase. Papers slid out, crisp as sheets pulled tight on a hotel bed. "Powers of attorney," Alvin explained, tapping the top page with a nail that clicked like a metronome. "Standard stuff. We'll keep things smooth in case anything God forbid happens." God forbid. He said it with a mouth that didn't know prayer. Marina shifted against the wall, her presence steady, her eyes tracking every move like a nurse with a difficult patient. She didn't speak, but her silence pressed on them, the kind that makes people over-explain. Patricia opened the tin of cookies, unwrapping the plastic with a crackle that sounded too loud. "Let's all sit, share a bite, talk this through." She pushed a sugar cookie toward me, its surface glittering like fake snow. I didn't touch it. My hands stayed folded in my lap. "What happens," I asked slowly, "if I say no?" The question made the air pause. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming for a moment. Raquel tilted her head, her earrings swaying like little knives. "Why would you say no, Evelyn? We're only protecting you." "It would be irresponsible not to." Miles leaned forward, elbows on the table. His wedding band gleamed under the light. "It's really just a signature, 1 page. That way, if something unexpected occurs, we don't have to scramble." Scramble. I thought of eggs broken on a pan, stirred until they lost all shape. Alvin slid the pen toward me. "Best to take care of it now. No sense delaying." Marina spoke then, her voice calm but cutting. "She'll read it first, carefully. No one signs anything tonight." All eyes turned to her. Raquel blinked, smile faltering just enough to show the teeth behind it. "And who exactly are you?" "Friend," Marina said simply. "The kind who knows how signatures work." Patricia gave a short laugh. "Isn't this a family matter?" "Funny," Marina replied, "because I thought family meant looking out, not looking over." The silence after was thick. I could hear the faint tick of the kitchen clock, louder than any heart in the room. Raquel smoothed her blouse, recovering. "Of course she should read it. We'll leave the documents here, no pressure." She glanced at Miles. "We only want to avoid complications." Complications. They said it like a diagnosis. Miles slid the papers closer, but not too close, as if expecting my hand to reach out on its own. "Just think it over, Mom," he said, voice soft now. "We don't want to be caught unprepared." The word prepared lodged in me like a thorn. Prepared for what? My fall? My absence? My erasure? I nodded once, not in agreement but in acknowledgement, the way you nod when a doctor tells you news you already guessed. Patricia pushed the cookie tin closer. "Eat something," she urged, her voice sticky. "You look pale." I thought of poison dressed as frosting. I let the cookies sit. The radiator hissed, a sharp exhale that made everyone flinch. Raquel gathered her purse. "We'll come back Wednesday," she said. "Give you time to look things over. It's better to settle these matters now, while you're clear-headed." The pause before clear-headed was deliberate. A small needle slid under skin. Marina uncrossed her arms, stepped forward just enough to stand beside me. "She's clear," she said evenly. "Clearer than you think." Their eyes flickered then, a brief flash of irritation they tried to smooth over. But I saw it. I saw it the way you see lightning far off, silent but undeniable. They left with goodbyes too cheerful, the door closing behind them with the polite thud of rehearsed civility. Their car engines hummed down the block, leaving exhaust that clung to the air like a warning. In the quiet, Marina picked up the papers, fanning through them. Power of attorney, transfer of property, medical decisions. They've been busy. I stared at the sugar cookie still glittering on the table. "They want me gone," I said, though the words tasted like ash. Marina stacked the papers neatly. "Then we'll make sure gone isn't simple." The house creaked above us, as if shifting its weight to listen. I thought of the rug. Every corner of my home now a chess piece in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I went to my notebook and wrote one word in block letters: witness. Because that's what I needed now, eyes that saw, ears that remembered. Proof. The radiator gave one last hiss, softer this time, like an agreement. The house smelled of lemon polish and stale sugar, traces from the last visit when Patricia's cookies went untouched. I had scrubbed the floors myself, each stroke of the rag both erasing and preparing. If they wanted a stage, I would give them one, but it would be mine. By 2 o'clock, the living room was arranged the way they liked it, papers on the coffee table, folders spread in neat piles, as if business had called a meeting. Marina hovered in the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of a stage manager, checking cameras, whispering into her phone to confirm the reporter and the officers were waiting outside. At exactly 3, engines idled at the curb. The sound rattled my windows before the knock did, measured, deliberate, 3 knocks again. They filed in like actors hitting their cues. Raquel first, perfume sharp enough to cut bread. Miles behind her with the briefcase this time. Alvin in his wool coat smelling faintly of tobacco. Patricia clutching her notebook like a hymn book. "Good to see you, Mom," Miles said, voice pitched for sincerity. He set the briefcase down on the table with a soft thud, like a gavel. Raquel glanced around. "You polished. Looks nice in here." She touched the banister, pressing, as if testing whether it would finally give. They took their seats without waiting for me, papers already spread. Patricia clicked her pen. "Let's get through this quickly," she muttered. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting them begin without me, letting them speak of my life as columns and signatures. Raquel smoothed the papers. "As we agreed, the assets will be distributed equitably, but first Miles is the primary signatory." Her words blurred into a low hum. I heard only the scrape of the pen against the page, the impatient sigh from Alvin, the rustle of Patricia's notebook. They looked like vultures rearranging feathers before a feast. Then the door opened again. Not my doing, the reporters. Maria Vargas stepped in, camera crew behind her, red light blinking. "Good afternoon," she said, voice steady as stone. Channel 7 News. "We're here by invitation." Every head turned. Raquel's smile collapsed in stages, like scaffolding dropping. "What is this?" she demanded. Miles rose halfway. "You can't just barge." But I stepped forward then. The sound of my shoes against the wood silenced him. Their eyes widened. Patricia gasped loud enough to echo. Alvin went pale, his hand gripping the arm of the chair, as if it were the only solid thing in the room. "Hello, my family," I said softly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Raquel stood, her face draining. You're dead?" I finished for her. I moved closer, the camera following, the red light catching every line of my face. "That's what you told the neighbors. That's what you planned for the papers to say. But you see, the reports of my death were inconveniently premature." Patricia began to cry, high-pitched and sharp. "This isn't real. You were gone. We saw the certificate." I placed my hand on the table, leaning close enough for them to see the life in me. "You saw what I let you see." Miles swallowed hard, his throat working. "Mom, listen. Don't call me that." I cut in, the words quiet but heavy. "Not while you're sitting at my table dividing my life into quarters." The reporter's microphone angled toward me. "Mrs. Brooks, can you explain to our viewers what you mean?" I pulled a folded paper from my coat pocket, the ledger printout, copied clean. I laid it on the table between their hands. "This," I said, "is your truth. Numbers and dates and timelines. Optimal, you called it. An accident staged here, in my house. My death budgeted like a project." Raquel's hand trembled as she reached for the page. "That's not—" I cut her off again, sliding my phone across the table. The recording played, tinny but clear. Her voice, Miles's voice, Alvin's low mutters. "The plan is perfect. She'll have a natural, believable accident." Every syllable filled the room like nails driven into wood. Patricia dropped her notebook. Alvin muttered, "It's edited. It's fake. But the camera stayed fixed, the officers stepping forward now, badges glinting. Fake? I asked. Then perhaps this will sound familiar. I tapped the second recorder. Their voices again, sharper this time, the casual cruelty of people planning furniture moves, not a life's end. Finally got rid of that burden. Better without her. Raquel covered her face. Miles shook his head, eyes wide, sweat gathering at his temple. Mom, please. No, I said. My voice steadied. Not Mom. I was your provider, your roof, your education. I was your excuse for envy, your leverage for greed. But Mother? That word belongs to someone else now. The officers moved in, one reading the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted homicide. The words clanged like church bells. As they were cuffed, Raquel sobbed, Alvin cursed under his breath, Patricia begged in fragments. Miles turned last, his face a blur of sweat and regret. It was supposed to be simple, he whispered, voice cracked. We didn't what? I asked, leaning closer. Didn't think I'd fight back? Didn't think I'd still have a pulse? Or didn't think a mother's eyes could open this wide? The camera caught everything, their wrists bound, their faces stripped of performance, the house that had been my trap now becoming theirs. Maria's voice cut in, professional but trembling with the shock of it. Viewers, you are witnessing live the arrest of 4 family members accused of plotting against their own kin. Mrs. Brooks, do you have any final words for them? I looked straight into the lens, straight into thousands of living rooms. Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty. Family doesn't measure your life in dollars, and family doesn't plan your funeral before you've stopped breathing. The silence after rang louder than any applause. The door closed behind them, officers guiding them into the night. The house sighed, lighter somehow. Marina stepped out of the kitchen, eyes shining but unshed, tears held back. You did it, she whispered. I sat down in the chair Miles had just abandoned, folded my hands on the table, and felt the grain of the wood under my fingers. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't clutching a pen or a recorder, just wood, just home. And I realized then, the armor had been forged, the battle fought. What came next was mine to build. The house was quiet the morning after, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for proof. Lemon polish had faded to the softer smell of old wood. I made coffee without watching the door, and when the kettle clicked off, it sounded like a curtain lowering. Marina texted a single word, breathe, and for once I did, without thinking about who might be counting. Courtrooms don't smell like justice. They smell like paper and lost time toner, old carpet, coffee that's been hot too long. I sat on a bench that gave a little under my weight and watched my name travel through other people's mouths. Brooks. It sounded square and reliable when the judge said it, small and mean when Patricia's lawyer did. Raquel came in a tailored suit that tried to make her smaller. Alvin wore a tie the color of a bruise. Miles had shaved too close, and the skin on his neck was raw. When they played the recordings, the room didn't move. Words I had already memorized filled a space where strangers could hear them. Optimal, accident, transfer. The mic caught Raquel's little laugh like glass breaking far away. A juror flinched. Another wrote something and pressed too hard, her pen tore the paper. I stared at the floor's scuff marks and counted the breaths between each sentence until counting was just breathing. After, the corridor outside smelled like cold air dragged in on coats. Marina squeezed my hand so the bones nested right. Almost through, she said, and I nodded because nodding takes less energy than explaining the way the past presses when you're asked to testify about it. The verdict didn't make a sound inside me when it landed. Guilty falls the same way acquittal does, words first, then a shuffle of feet. Later, alone, the meaning arrives. Sentences were handed out like measurements, years and months, a tailor taking grief's hem. Miles looked at me as the numbers fell, and for a flicker, I saw the boy with popsicle teeth, not the man who could say optimal about a mother's breath. The flicker went out. The deputies did their work. At home, I opened the windows even though it was cold, and the air moved through the rooms like a blessing that doesn't care whether or not you asked. I set the clipboard Raquel loved on the curb with the recycling. I took the rug at the top of the stairs in both hands and shook it until dust made its own weather in the hallway. Then I laid it back down without tucking the corner. Some rebellions deserve a monument. "What now?" Marina asked, leaning in the doorway, scarf bright as always. "Now we make something that isn't them," I said, and it surprised me that my voice didn't shake. We started small. New curtains that let morning in like a guest with good manners. A plant on the kitchen sill, the kind that forgives if you forget it one day but not two. I dragged the dining table 6 inches to the left, and the room sighed like it had been waiting for the chance to stand up straight. I cooked a pot of beans that perfumed the house with smoke and cumin, and every time I stirred, the spoon tapped a steady little heart against the pot. People knocked. Not the ones who make lists, the ones who bring casseroles that taste like somebody's grandmother. Church ladies whose names contain more history than syllables. The mailman, who said he saw me on the news and tried to pretend he didn't. Teenagers from down the block who wanted to shovel the walk. I let them and paid them double, and their thank yous clattered shy and sincere on the porch. The first letter from Miles arrived in an envelope that tried to look ordinary. The handwriting wasn't his old print. The lawyer must have told him to take his time. I read the first line and had to sit. He used my name, not Mom, and the word behaved itself on paper. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He wrote about a class in the prison library where a teacher made them copy sentences by hand until the mind stopped sprinting. He said the copying quieted him, and he had never known how loud he'd been. He said he remembered the smell of cafeteria gravy and the way I tucked a corner of the sheet under his feet because he liked feeling contained. "I don't deserve to remember," he wrote, "but I do. I am writing, so you know I remember." I folded the letter once, then again, as if smaller might hurt less. I didn't answer right away. Some responses aren't words, they're seasons. I set it under Frank's watch and told time to do slow work. With the settlement money from the story rights and a small check, a stranger sent with a note that said, simply, "For the computers you pawned." I opened an account at a credit union where the clerks say your name like they're giving it back to you. We started a fund, 5 working mothers a year, tuition, books, bus passes. I named it for my mother, because debts can be paid forward, if not back. The application asked for no essays. You can't grade hunger. The bank manager asked what to call me for the paperwork. "Evelyn is fine," I said. "Not Mrs. Brooks?" she offered, polite. "Evelyn," I repeated, and she smiled like a person does when they learn the right dance step. I sold the house. Not out of fear, out of honesty. The walls had too many echoes, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life telling them to hush. I packed the photographs last. The buyer, young, earnest, a music teacher who touched the banister with reverence, promised to keep the lace curtains up, at least through spring. At the closing, the pen was heavy, and the ink looked like night. I cried in the parking lot, and then felt lighter than crying knows what to do with. The new place is small and stubborn. It holds heat where I need it, and lets light sit on the floor in clean rectangles. There's a patch of dirt out back where I put basil and tomatoes because both complain if you starve them but forgive if you come back in time. I nailed Frank's watch to the inside of a cabinet where only I can see it. It doesn't tick. It doesn't have to. Sometimes I open the door just to look and then close it again like I've done a magic trick for an audience of one. On Saturdays, Marina and I push 2 tables together at the community center and call it the Ledger Clinic. People bring envelopes with angry windows, medical bills written in a language that pretends to be English, and we act as translators. "This line item isn't love," Marina says, tapping a charge that arrived like a threat. "This fee has nothing to do with dignity," I add, circling another. We make phone calls with hold music that could make saints swear. And when the person on the other end finally answers, we use our Sunday voices and our Monday questions. Sometimes we lose, but sometimes we don't, and on those days the walk home feels like a parade no one planned. I get letters from women I will never meet. They tuck photographs into the envelopes, children in hand-me-downs that fit like gladness, a cap and gown with a tired face under it, shining anyway. One card came with a pressed dandelion and a note, "Wish granted." I put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a pie slice, and it makes me smile the way small accuracy does. Once, in the grocery store, a woman my age touched my sleeve. I watched. She whispered, "I left." He said I couldn't. I left anyway. We stood by the canned tomatoes and breathed the metallic smell of safety. I put 2 cans in her cart because friends do that, even if they have not been introduced. On the first warm evening of spring, I brought the basil inside because the forecast threatened a mean joke overnight. I stood at the sink and rubbed a leaf between my fingers until the smell rose. Marina texted, "Look up," and when I did, the sky had that thin gold edge the day keeps just for people who saw the worst part and stayed. Another letter came from Miles months later. It was shorter. He wrote about a workshop where they grow tomatoes under lights, the way the vines search even when there's nowhere to go. He said he thinks about the ring, and the computer, and the ledger, and how each was a kind of math he did not understand in time. "If you answer," he wrote, "tell me one thing you're growing. I'd like to picture it." I put the letter under a magnet shaped like a lemon and made tea because deciding isn't a thing you do with a dry mouth. I wrote back 2 days later. "Basil," I said. "It's a plant that refuses to be background. It needs what it needs and doesn't apologize. I am trying to be like that. I did not sign Mom. I signed Evelyn. He will have to earn the other word as if it is a degree and there is no ceremony." On Sundays, the church pew still sighs when I sit. The notice board continues to promise bingo and coat drives, and sometimes I think that continuity is another kind of miracle. After service, I put a sign-up sheet for the scholarship on the table by the coffee urn, and people hover shyly and write their names like it might make trouble. We will handle the trouble when it comes. I don't keep the ledger copy in the drawer with Frank's watch anymore. I moved it to a folder labeled for the accountant because some ghosts deserve jobs, not altars. The notebook where I once wrote, "In case when," now holds recipes and phone numbers and the measurements for new curtains. On the first page of a new section, I wrote 3 lines, "Careful and even. Family is behavior. Safety is work. Joy is a practice. The radiator in the new place pings when the heat comes on." It sounds like a polite tap at a door that is already open. I go to the garden, lean down, and let the smell of basil tell me the day's forecast better than any app. My hands come back smelling green and insisting. Inside, the kettle sings and quiets, sing and quiets. Outside, a neighbor kid practices a trumpet that will be a trumpet someday. I set 2 cups on the table even when I'm alone. It makes the room remember abundance. When Marina knocks, she'll take the other cup. When she doesn't, it will go to the sink and leave a ring that means someone was expected. Some mornings I kiss my fingers and press them to the watch inside the cabinet door, not because I think he'll answer but because the gesture keeps time. You asked me, all those months ago, if I was good. I didn't know then how to answer. Today, with dirt under my nails and a house that does not list my hazards, with women's letters clipped to the refrigerator and a fund that buys textbooks instead of alibis, I can say it plain, I am good. Not because of what they did to me or what the court did to them, because of what I am building in the space they cleared, because Basil is stubborn, because chosen family shows up with soup and a plan, because sometimes the ledger belongs to me. In the end, Evelyn's story is not only about betrayal uncovered, but about the power of standing up when silence would have been easier. It reminds us that family is not defined by bloodlines or last names, but by loyalty, presence, and care. Too often, older adults in our communities are treated as burdens, their lives tallied in dollars or liabilities, rather than honored for the sacrifices and wisdom they carry. Yet Evelyn shows us that vigilance, courage, and chosen allies can transform even the cruelest betrayal into a chance for renewal. The deeper lesson is this: dignity is not a gift others grant us. It is something we must claim, protect, and pass on. And protecting ourselves does not mean shutting out the world. It means choosing carefully who we let in, finding friends who stand firm when others conspire, and refusing to let our story end in someone else's ledger. If Evelyn's journey resonates with you, let it be a reminder to review your own protections, to have honest conversations about trust, and to look out for the neighbors, friends, and relatives who may be quietly carrying more than they let on. Share this story, start those hard talks, and stand beside those who need an ally. Every act of awareness and kindness makes our communities safer, warmer, and harder to exploit. May you find strength in your own story, courage in your choices, and comfort in knowing you are not alone.